Lesson 48, we will be able to explain what causes populations to vary, and that is biodiversity. Now, biodiversity is something that you guys may have seen before. It's something that you guys may have seen way back when you did ecosystems. And I taught biodiversity to my year 7s back in the day, but it's been a long time, so you may not remember what biodiversity is. For those of you that don't remember what biodiversity is, in a nutshell, it just means that living things are different. It means that if I go out to a lake and if I go out to a lake in the middle of nowhere and I count how many different types of animal species, there should be a lot of different animal species. There should be frogs, birds, fish, leeches. There should be, beetles, worms, just so many different types of species because it's a biodiverse ecosystem. It's just got so many different things, and that's really good for an ecosystem to have lots of different things. The reason it's really good for an ecosystem to have lots of different things is because, it means that there are lots of different foods for animals to eat. There are lots of different plants that can grow, and all these different things are really, really good. But diverse biodiversity we're going to talk about doesn't just mean different species. It means that if you then did something different, let's just say you went out there and then you collected every single, you went out to this lake and you got a massive net and you pulled up every single river crab that you could find, and you put them all next to each other, they would all be different because they are all diverse. Even though they're all a crab, even though you've got just the one species, they might look a little bit similar, but all of them are different. And that's another type of biodiversity. But the idea is living things are different. That's what we're going, that's the main living thing, oopsies. Living things are different. Now that's the take-home message today. That's by the end of today's lesson. I want you guys to be able to say, yeah, living things are different. I want you to be able to give me some reasons why living things are different. And I want you to tell me, well, what happens when living things aren't different? What happens when you have a massive population of just the same type of animal, the same type of plant? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? What could that mean? Before we get into this, let's talk about what we did last time. So last lesson I had you guys, we were talking about evolution. We started off with just wanted to get a definition of evolution. And evolution is a change within the heritable traits or behaviors within a population across generations. What that means is that it's a change in your traits. It's a change in traits over time, but it's within a population, so within a large number of animals, not an individual, but a population, a group of animals, across generations, over a long time. So lots of animals or lots of organisms. I have to be careful over this because they always say lots of animals, but I've got to be careful because it's plants can evolve too. If a plant suddenly starts growing away towards the sun, that doesn't mean that it's evolving towards the sun. It's evolving to move closer towards the sun. It just means that that's part of its feature. But again, over time, if those plants had more movement towards the sun, that would be evolution. So lots of organisms, so lots of different things over a long time. So it's never an individual, and it's never an individual evolves, and it's always over many generations. We said that what is a population? First, before we move on to that, heritable traits, these are things that you can get from your parents. A trait is like, your hair color, your eye color. It could be, it could be structural or functional. So functional trait could be something like, if you're an animal, it could be that you're nocturnal. If you're a plant, it could be that you make flowers. They're things that you do, not necessarily things that you have. And then generation is just a group of organisms born at the same time. So when we say two generations, we're talking about the children of children, and then we talk about 3 generations, we're talking about great grandchildren. We're talking about 4 generations, 5 generations, great great grandchildren, stuff like that. A population is a large group of the same type of animal. That's why I said like a population of mud crabs or river crabs, whatever I said. And a community is many different types of organisms living in a habitat. What is an ecosystem? The ecosystem is the complex interaction. So how do they interact with each other? We talked about, well, here are some breakdowns of it. And then we looked at the other direction. How does a cell go up to make a whole organism? And we've already talked about these two in year 9. So therefore, we're going to look at how these are connected. We talked about the difference between evolution versus metamorphosis. We talked about a giraffe, just an example of evolution. And then we discussed mutation. So the mutation is when mutations where something goes wrong in your copying process, and so therefore your new copy is not the same as the original. Now, this mutation, I didn't really quite go into a lot of detail. I will say this: is like it can be a mutation caused by just your DNA making a mistake. It could be it could be your DNA copying a bit of broken DNA, because your DNA, remember, is just like it's part of you as a living thing. It can get damaged over time. One of the classic ways it can get damaged is if it gets exposed to UV light. So that's why if you get sunburns, you can damage your DNA. There are other ways you can damage your DNA. You can damage like free radicals can damage your DNA. If you have certain chemicals into your body that can damage your DNA, even if you get like radiation from like, that can damage your DNA. And damaged DNA is going to copy with mutations in it. So that's just another way that you can get mutations, not just your body making a mistake. Sometimes your body could get destroyed or get damaged. Chance of mutation, although low, there is a chance, though low, that your DNA is prepared with mutation. Mutation is randomly chosen. You don't get to choose what part of your DNA gets damaged. And so therefore, you don't get to choose what traits you get. You could get any trait. That trait could be really good for you, could be really bad for you. You might not even be able to see that trait show up at all. So that's what we talked about, mutation. Talked about some modification stuff, like how are these different. We talked about in evolution what something called LUCA, which is like if everything is changing slowly, and this is the idea that we've finished up with. If evolution is changing slowly, if slowly over time, different species are getting slightly different, like these species, these 3 new species are just a slight modification of the original species, then there must have been a point where we were all the same. And that's what LUCA is. LUCA is the last universal common ancestor. It is the point at which we were all the same organism. And from that point, well, maybe one of those, the universal ancestor, maybe one of them decides to grow lungs, and one of them decides to grow roots, and then that's how plants and animals get split up, and so on and so forth. So today, and then the theory of evolution, it just is as you grow older, your descendants have modifications. That's really the main thing. Complex creatures evolve from more simplistic ancestors naturally over time. Genetic mutation. As you take a simple thing, because like the DNA makes a mistake, that mistake might be good. So therefore, the next animal might have that mistake as well. But then that makes that animal very different from the first animal. So if you have a common, so if you have a ancestor, and then that makes You know, two different, that makes two different, like, you know, organisms. One that looks like this and one that looks like this. Those might evolve into different kinds of, you know, those might evolve into very, very, very different kinds of, into very, very different kinds of species. Even though they both came from the same original one, now these species are far more complex. And of course, as they grow, they could then, like, you know, evolve different ones as well. So this snake-like thing could turn into a coiled up snake, or it could turn into like just a really long snake or something like that. I don't know. My point is that they evolve and change. Now we're going to look at some more examples as we go. We're going to start talking about biodiversity today's lesson. We've got about an hour because we've got an hour left. I don't think we'll get through all of biodiversity because I've got a lot of slides here. I'm trying to break these slides up with some extra little bits. Before I move on, there was a question from yours truly, Brendan Chain. Can you prevent or slow down aging? You can prevent or slow down aging. There's actually a fair bit of research into it. Aging is caused by ultimately your DNA slowly not being able to replicate as well as it used to. And so that's part of it, aging. There are other things as well. The other thing, part of aging is, I believe from memory, the introduction of free radicals into your bloodstream. Free radicals are, essentially we get free radicals all the time. Whenever you breathe in air, you're getting some oxidation of your body, oxidants, and you see that's why they advise you drink antioxidants. But yeah, like there are ways that you could rejuvenate your DNA, but it's not necessarily easy at the moment. That's a very, very quick answer to your question. I suggest you do some more research. We will be able to explain the cause of population theory. So let's start with a definition of biodiversity, shall we? I think that'd be a good place to start. Biodiversity. Now, biodiversity is a term used to describe the difference in living things. Now, there are different types of biodiversity. The first one that we're going to talk about is species diversity. This is how many different types of species in an ecosystem. A rainforest has lots of living things, so there's high species diversity. You've got fungus, you've got trees, you've got moss, you've got ferns, you've got frogs, you've got lizards, you've got beetles, you've got birds, you've got, you know, so many different things all living in the rainforest. So therefore there's a huge diversity of living things. There's a huge diversity of just life. If you said to someone, right, go into the rainforest and grab something that's living, and they came back, there'd be so many different things that they could have brought back to you. So yeah, that's what species diversity means. But there's another type of diversity. This is what I was talking about in my introduction. Genetic diversity. This is how diverse or different organisms are in a particular species. If you grab a look on the right, we've got the species of dog. All of those are dogs, but all of those dogs look very, very, very different. There are many different species of dog. So, and that's even, I don't think that's all of them. I think there is even more than the ones that have got pictured there. So, you know, like there are lots of different species of dog, but there's still a lot of different, there's a lot of diversity within dogs, but they're still all dogs. And the same with humans. There is a lot of different diversity in humans. Like none of you guys look identical to anyone else. So there's a big diversity in the amount of humans we have. And that's, again, because of genetic diversity. Animals are, you know, things are different over time, over particular species. Yeah, so that's just the basics of biodiversity. Next, we're going to discuss whether or not this is biodiversity is a good thing. And if it is, why is it a good thing? I'm going to tell you it is a good thing for a species to be biodiverse, or an ecosystem to be biodiverse, but why is what we're going to discuss. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys maybe another minute to copy this down. I actually think I've got a question for you guys first, but we'll we'll talk about that in about 50 seconds. Okay, so let's keep moving then. So this is general biodiversity, differences between living things. So now let's talk about, quick question. The rainforest has lots of living things, so it has a high diversity. Can I get someone in chat to suggest what environments, I want to see at least 5 different answers maybe, and then I'll move on. What environments would have very little species diversity? Can you guys think of a environment or a location where a lot of the animals would be the same, where there are, or a species where there aren't many living things? There's just, you know, all the living things that are there are all the same living thing. I'm gonna let you guys have a think about this, but I want you guys to put an answer in chat. Who can think of at least one? I want to get. I think I can think of 3 examples, but I want at least one example from you guys. The first one is a desert, and I would say yes, that would be. Thank you, Alex, for that. I would say yeah, a desert is definitely going to have a low biodiversity. And the reason for the desert having a low biodiversity is because there's just not many different species. They're all like and then they're all going to be barely surviving as it is. So then the next one suggested is from Lino, suggests caves. I would say caves. You know what? I would say yeah, some caves will just have one type of organism in there. There might be a couple in there, but they're probably not going to have a lot because you can't really have many plants in a cave. So therefore, there's going to be a low diversity of like vegetation. It's just going to be living things, or you know, maybe some fungus and some mold and stuff. But you know, it's probably not going to be plants. Mountains, yeah, mountains I'd agree too. High up mountains because it's going to be rough terrain for the animals or plants to grow in. Anywhere else? I can think of maybe 1, maybe 2 more. Anything else? I'm happy with what we've got if no one can think of anything else, but yeah. Urban areas. Who said that? Nice job. That's actually one of my answers. That I've got 2 answers in my head. Urban areas are correct. That's one of the ones I was thinking about. Because if you think about it, if you walk around the thanks Brendan Chang. If you look around the just the streets in a city, you will see, yeah, sure, some rats, some birds, and maybe some trees planted every so often, but it's not a diverse ecosystem. There's not lots and lots and lots of different types of animal. There's just a couple of random ones, and the other one, of course, the problem with that is that the other problem with that is that you don't have as many places. Sorry, the other problem as well is they don't have as many food sources because they rely so heavily on human beings. But yeah, the only other one that I thought of was something like you know, the Arctic, and that's where you've got like polar bears and penguins, and then that's about it. All of these places that can, now this is for the bonus question, this is for the big brain people here, ladies and gents. Is there anything that you guys can tell before we move on?
Mr. Grill.
Yo.
I said ice deserts as in like Antarctica and the frozen you find. That's what I said.
Did I miss that? Sorry.
Yeah. Cold deserts. But isn't that just desert? Like same thing?
Well, no, they're very similar, but yeah. Ice desert. I did miss that. Sorry, I missed that. So I didn't see that. I must have rolled quickly to caves instead. Ice. Yeah, exactly. Arctic. And then yeah, ice. Yeah. Well, a desert is somewhere where there's not much, where there's no rain. So yeah. Isn't Arctic a desert? Yes, technically the Arctic can be a desert. Not all of the Arctic is a desert, but some of it is. Here's the question that I have for you. The big brain question is this: how are these places related, or what do they have in common? Aside from having low species diversity, why do they? I guess what I want to get is I want to get to the why. Why are these places, especially if you think of the desert, the Arctic, the mountains, what makes these places have low biodiversity? If no one can have an answer, that's okay. I think I would stick with, yeah, I'm going to stick with this idea here. They're not suitable and there's not much food. Not suitable. And that's my answer here. I thank you guys for participating. I just want to break this up with getting you guys to jump in every so often, because otherwise it's just going to be me talking for an hour and I don't want that to happen. Not suitable and there's not much food. Exactly. I think that's a really good answer here. There is not, these places, a desert just doesn't have much food, much water. It's very difficult to live in. Same with the Arctic. There's not much food and there's not much, it's very cold. So it's very difficult to live in that place. So these places are very difficult to live in. And because it's very difficult to live in them, not many species choose to live in them, or have evolved to live in them, or do just and live in them in full stop. So therefore they have low biodiversity. And if you've got low biodiversity, that can be a bad thing. Why can low biodiversity be a bad thing? Thank you for participating, guys. But I've got a few more of these types of questions later on, but we'll get to that. So what does that mean? Well, low biodiversity means, well, next slide. Well, what's the advantage of genetic diversity? Why is it good to be different? It's good to be different. This means that some genetic differences may lead your species to adapt to your environment over time. If you've got a really diverse species and someone evolves, someone in your species evolves like claws, then that's going to help your species overall down the track. Suddenly those claws will allow you to start climbing things like trees and stuff, and that might mean you can more better protect it. Someone in your species may evolve a red spots on their, a red shell, which means because you're a ladybug and stuff, and then that might mean that you're less likely to get eaten, and if you're less likely to get eaten, that might be a good trait to have, and so that can get passed on. So having differences and having someone that's different is a really good thing. It's good to be different. This means that some genetic differences may lead your species to adapt to your environment over time. Another good reason is a virus will affect individuals differently and less likely to wipe out a population. There is a big thing. So for example, if a virus, let's just say a virus comes out and it just, completely destroys you or a disease completely wipes out one particular type of organism. If all of the organisms are exactly the same, then it will kill the whole population. But if some of them are a little bit different, then that might mean that some will be resistant to a particular disease. So that's another way that you can evolve. On the right here, we've got a picture of corn. And I bet you didn't know that all these were corn. The assorted colors of kernels of different varieties of corn are a result of genetic diversity. All of those on the right are just corn. But even though they're all cobs of corn, they all look different because they've all got different genes in them. They're all genetically a little bit different, even though they've got this, the same one. Some of them are different colors, some of them different sizes, some of them got different kernels. They've got small kernels, large kernels. So yeah, like they're just different. I've got a bit of a story about about a banana, but I might leave that story to the end of the lesson if there's time. It's called the Gross Michael banana. It used to be the most popular banana. Actually, I'll talk about it now. And I'm going to talk about it while I'm talking about that. You guys should copy down the rest of this slide. Don't copy down the Gross Michael part. You don't need that. I'll tell you a story. So roughly, I was reading recently, they were talking about the 1860s. I think it was 1860s because it probably wasn't 1960s. The 1860s, they had this big thing where they were traveling around the world and they found these bananas. And what they did is they brought these bananas back to America, and Americans loved bananas. They had never seen bananas before because obviously bananas don't grow in America. But what they started to do is they started to import them, like lots of them. But what they started to do is banana farmers decided to start saying, well, the best bananas to grow are these ones called the Gross Michael banana because they're just so big and they're so sweet. And so they used to start growing them. And so what they ended up with is they ended up with all of their banana species were just the same banana, the same Gross Michael banana. But not only that, because of the way that you can make banana trees and how you can take like a cutting of one tree and use it in a different tree, not only were they all the same banana species, they were actually the same banana because they'd essentially cloned it. Like what? How did you clone something before the 1860s, before science got technology advancements? How they did that is just by just taking cuttings. If you take a cutting of a plant and you replant that, you'll actually have a clone, the exact same plant as the first one. And so and America enjoyed this beautiful, delicious banana for many years, right up until this black fungus started to attack the banana plants. And what would happen is that the black fungus would get in and it would kill the plant. You're like, okay, it's not really a big deal. But because every single plant was identical, every single plant died to the same black fungus. There was no way to protect those bananas because they just died to it because they were exactly identical because they were clones. They all experienced the same symptoms, and so therefore they all died. And what happened is that banana species called the Gross Michael went extinct. And so what happened is we moved to a new banana species. So what happened is that we moved to Cavendish bananas. Now that's the one that you might see at the supermarket. They're the big yellow ones at the moment, but they're repeating the same problem. All we're doing is we're replacing one banana with another, and then that banana, the new one, is also still not immune to the black fungus. So eventually that banana species may go extinct as well. The importance here is to try and eat a variety of different species. To be completely honest with you, when I was in high school, I actually didn't know that there were different types of banana. I just thought, yeah, they're bananas. They're called bananas, but there are different types. There's like Cavendish bananas, ladyfinger bananas. There's red top bananas. There are so many different types of bananas that you can get, and so it's always worth trying. Same with apples. If you think about it, Granny Smith, Pink Lady, Fuji. There are so many different types of apples, and having a diverse type of a diverse type of species of apples that you eat is actually a really good thing to try and keep a species, trying to keep the food alive, trying to keep them around. So it's an interesting story, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link on the Google Classroom for a video from a guy. Some of you guys probably have seen Simon Whistler Today I Found Out. If you haven't heard of that, it's a YouTube video. But yeah, he did a quick video about, it's called The Extinction of the Banana and stuff like that. There was a quick little thing I remember watching a long time ago. It's a bit too it's a bit nerdy, but still, it talks about genetic diversity and why it's important. So yeah, okay, so genetic diversity is just how we're all different. Yeah, sure. So what? So how do we get different? What's the main ways that we have different species? How do you get variation between individuals? What makes you and I and everyone else in this Zoom different? Well, the first one is the one that we've already discussed. What causes genetic diversity? The first one is easy. It is mutation. As discussed earlier, mistakes in DNA replication can cause different individuals. So if you are if you reproduce asexually, which means that you make an exact copy of yourself because you're some kind of bacteria, then if you make a mistake, then you're new in the copying process, then the new organism will be different to you, and then that's completely fine. The textbook doesn't actually talk about something kind of cool that it does, which is called if there are any biology nerds here that really want to do biology in year 11, I suggest you look up horizontal gene transfer. Really interesting stuff. I actually don't understand it very well. My basic understanding of horizontal gene transfer is that bacteria can actually also steal DNA from other bacteria, and they just steal it. They just take it from their bacteria and then they change their DNA. And so it's called horizontal gene transfer because it's not they're having kids with different DNA, they're actually changing their DNA by accessing different things. But yeah, it's something interesting. Not important here, but yeah, the other way we can get variation between individuals, as and we're not talking about horizontal gene transfer, though it is an actual way there is differences, is sexual reproduction. Organisms that reproduce sexually mix their genetic material, meaning offspring will be completely unique from each other and their parents. And that's the idea. We went through a whole like massive unit on this sexual reproduction. We said, oh, you're taking half of your genes and and then you're swapping them around between different within a chromosome, and then you're taking half of your partner's genes, and then that makes a mate which has got a random assortment of different genes, and so therefore they're going to experience a random different traits that are going to be combinations of both parents. And so, but it's also could be combinations of both parents and their recessive qualities you can't see in the parents. So there's a lot of different interesting things that can occur. But ultimately what we're talking about here, where do we come back to, is this word here, variation. These two processes mean that one animal, one plant will be different from another plant. And that's really important. Because if it turns out that, oh man, like that random mutation that gave you, that allowed one particular rabbit to have more fur than another rabbit, may make that animal survive. And in fact, there is something we can use to refer that to. Can I change the slide? Are we good?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Yep, okay, cool. I'm going to change the slide. On the picture on the right here, we've got DNA for gene A, DNA for mutant version of A. So this is like a mistaked version of A, this one here. It just so happens that this DNA makes this protein, whereas this DNA makes this protein. Almost identical, except you can see a mistake in the protein being made. And that mistake in the protein is because of a mistake in the genetic material. And that mistake in the protein makes a different kind of mouse. Maybe that protein is supposed to make white fur, but because it's got that extra thing, it just doesn't work very well, and so it makes black fur instead. And so you end up with a black mouse. And that black mouse may find hiding in the dark a lot easier than the white mouse, and so therefore that might be a trait that goes on to get passed on. So let's talk a little bit about that actually. If a variation between individuals, we've got mutations, what happens when one of these mutations is actually a good thing? Do we have a special name for it? And we do. A variation that leads to a survival advantage for an organism is called an adaptation. So a good mutation is called an adaptation. It's just another way to think about it. An adaptation is a good mutation. There's no and it's also, there's no thing as a bad mutation. There's no word for bad mutation, but there's also I guess the other one as well is that you might not think that you can't really know if something's a good adaptation until later on. These can be structural, like hair color, or they can be behavioral. So for example, as I said, nocturnal. Do you come out at nighttime? That could be a behavior. Or physiological, what their bodies can do. The example for physiological in the books was, maybe you're able to reabsorb water from your own urine so that therefore you don't waste water. That's a thing that your body can do. And so therefore that might be something that might be help you survive. You may, it might be the case that you lay more eggs than another animal, so therefore that might make your species survive more. That's a physiological thing. That's something your body can do. So on and so forth. And the other one as well is behavior, of course. If your behavior is, different behaviors are going to mean different things. So that's a good, and if you see this picture, I found this picture when I was just looking on the internet, and I was like, oh my God, this is such a good picture. You've got two different rabbits here. You've got a brown rabbit and a white rabbit. And the white rabbit's hopping around in that snow. And I'm thinking to myself, right, even looking at this picture straight up, I can see the brown rabbit very clearly against the brown snow. Whereas the white rabbit, I'm struggling to see where the white rabbit's bum ends and the snow begins. It's very difficult to see. So therefore, that's a good adaptation. That's going to mean that this animal, this rabbit, can blend in with the snow. So if it's getting hunted by a wolf or a fox or even a bird, it could just blend, coil up in the snow, and then next thing you know, it's pretty much invisible. That brown rabbit, though, won't be able to do that. And so that's a adaptation. It's a pretty good adaptation. It's a pretty good change to its genes because now it's more likely to survive. I'm going to keep this slide up for a little bit longer and then I'm going to change it. And I've got another question for you. All right, I'm going to change the slide now, unless someone says no, please wait. Okay. All right, so the next slide talks about, the next slide's a question for you guys. So we've got this picture here where I said here that, this rabbit has adapted. It has had a mutation that's given it white fur, which is an adaptation, which is a good mutation, and that this good mutation is going to help this animal survive. My question is how can an adaptation help an organism survive? So can someone tell me, so this adaptation, we're going to start with the white rabbit one. Can someone tell me why, and in chat, and this is a question for you guys in chat, why is this adaptation a good thing? Why is this rabbit having white fur good for the animal? How does it help it survive? It's easier to run away from predators. That's sort of what I would say. Easier to run away from predators. The white fur is going to keep it warm, but any color fur. It could have pink fur and it's going to keep it warm. But it can, and I wouldn't say run away from, to be specific, Alex, because having white fur is not going to make it easier, but it's going to make it easier to hide from predators. And that's going to help you survive, because if you're not getting eaten, that's a good thing. Who can tell me? Now we're gonna open it up to be a bit more broad. Yeah, it's camo, exactly. Camouflage. Now here's the next one. Who can tell me what are some other ways, like a change to an animal might make it better at surviving? What's some other things you could do? Maybe start thinking about a predator. What are some changes to a predator that might make it better to survive? What does it need to survive better? Weapons, yeah, I like that. Tina's thinking very much like that. And of course, so a predator would mean how can an organism survive? So an adaptation could make hunting easier. That's a really good way. That's what an adaptation can do. It can make hunting easier, and that could mean, you know, weapons, aka, you know, claws, or, you know, a beak or something like that. You know, something sharp and pointy that they can use to hunt easier. Give it a knife and then you go all out. I don't think you can do that, but yeah, it can make it hunting easier. So, and both of these, that sort of is to do with, essentially, hunting is also to do with food, right? But that sort of goes for many different things. It doesn't just have to be hunting easier. It could mean, like, you know, maybe you want to be able to access food. So, for example, one of the classic ones is birds that are able to open nuts. So if you've got a really, really hard nut, if you had an adaptation that allowed you to crack into that nut, then that means you could access more food. That's going to be a really good thing. So we've talked about food, we've talked about hunters. Let's go back to, Brendan, let's go back to the one that you suggested. You said keep warm, right? I'm actually going to put that one up here. I'm going to say, we're going to talk about how can an adaptation help an organism survive? We could talk about climate. Can your organism deal with a particular climate? If you have a fish that lives in cold Arctic ice, and now that fish can't move into warm waters, is there a way that you could adapt to make yourself able to move into warm water? This is a bit of a broad sort of topic here, but that's actually the first thing of survival, not camo. Yeah, I agree. It's climate, being able to adapt to a specific climate is really important. So if you're in the freezing cold, you need to make sure that you, and let's just say that your species adapts, someone in your species adapts a warmer fur coat, then that's going to be really good for your, species, because then that means that that's an adaptation. It's going to mean that that species can survive a bit better. All of these are great sort of things. And so when we talk about adaptations, if I bring up something, I'm going to move on in a second. You don't have to copy this down. I'm just putting this up here as just something to think about. So whenever we talk about, like, oh man, this species via evolution has gained the ability to, you know, have long claws, you should think, well, how does that help that species? Well, if you have claws, you can, you know, hunt easier. You can climb up trees. It's a really good thing. You might say, oh, they've got, like, this species has adapted to learn how to move in groups. And it's like, well, that's good. That's going to mean that they're going to be harder to be attacked by predators. And you might think, but no, come on, moving in groups, that's not an adaptation. It's like, yeah, remember I said evolution is also behavioral. So if you start to change your behavior, if you're over generations, you learn, hey, it's actually a good idea to move in groups because we're less likely to be attacked. Anyway, let's move on. That was just a little bit of a question here in the middle. Let's move on to now. So we're talking about changes happening in between person A and person B. What about changes over the whole, everyone in a population? And that becomes the name in variation of population. I'm sorry there's a lot of text here, but I couldn't really think of a way to talk about this. A gene pool, and a lot of you guys may have heard the word gene pool before. It's about time we actually use it in science. A gene pool refers to the different types of traits or alleles in a population and their frequencies. So how do I'm going to talk more and more about this, but ultimately a gene pool just refers to all of the different possible traits that you could have, you know? So if you looked at the gene pool for humans, then it's going to be, you know, it's not going to have a lot of things in the gene pool. You're going to have, you know, left-handed, right-handed genes. You're going to have eye-colored genes. You're going to have different hair color genes, different height genes. But yeah, these are all the possibilities that you could get. You're not going to be able, there are no human beings, okay, I very much doubt, but there are no human beings that can breathe underwater. So that's not a gene that is in the gene pool. There are no human beings with wings. So that's not a gene in the gene pool. You can't access that gene. Organisms that do not breathe do not get their genes added to the gene pool. So let's just say, due to some miracle, there is a human being that can fly, that you know, is born with wings. If that person with wings doesn't actually have children, then their genes don't get added to the gene pool. They disappear. One of the things, before I move on to the example down the bottom, there is a classic insult with regards to the gene pool, which is just like, you know, you just sort of say that person shouldn't be allowed. That person shouldn't be allowed back in the gene pool. It's implying that person really shouldn't have children because they're already a massive mistake as it is. They shouldn't really be reproducing and making more stupid people. That's like an insult, but there's a lot of better ones. And it's like, you know, you must have come out of a pretty shallow gene pool, implying, yeah, you know what? It's probably you're very, very similar to the people around you because there's not many differences to you. But yeah, there are a couple of good examples. There are a couple of really good insults with regards to the gene pool if you want to look them up. But yeah, it just means the place where we all get our DNA from. Obviously, it's not a physical pool. If you guys are thinking about an actual pond or an actual physical pool full of genes, that's not how it works. It's like a metaphor. It's like saying, well, these are the available genes to our species. Down at the bottom is a bit of an example. In a group of yellow flowers, one flower gets a red streak. And I'm like, okay, cool. That could be like a red streak in a flower. Maybe it looks like a bit like flames is what I thought to myself. That'd be cool. And if that gene could get back into the gene pool because it can breathe, then maybe other plants could get other red streaks. Maybe they could turn red completely. Maybe some of them would get blue streaks or whatever. But this flower is picked by a girl. Now those red streak genes can't be added to the gene pool. Those genes are removed. Now, you aren't limited to just the gene pool. I should point out that in human beings, remember, we've got mutations happening all the time. So new genes are getting added. Whether those genes survive or not, well, you know, that's dependent on a couple of things. The idea is that you can add, like, new things can get added to the gene pool. For some species, so for example, for dogs, the advantage as well is if you breed with different dogs, you know, and you can add brand new genes to the gene pool. And we're going to talk about how a gene pool can get changed. I'm going to leave this slide open for another minute. I'm actually going to grab my jump, actually. It's a bit cold here. And then we're going to move on to talking about changing this gene pool. All right. I'm just looking up insults. One of them said that your gene pool could use a little chlorine, implying, yeah, you shouldn't be whatever gene pool you came out of, it doesn't really deserve to be the reason that you're the reason the gene pool needs a lifeguard. So they're kind of like drawing, you know, your genes are just so crap. We need to have someone making sure that, you know, you're not that someone's making sure that everyone doesn't get those genes. It's just it's just there are some good insults. I can't find any quick ones really, but I'm sure there are. Let's power through. Let's talk about. I don't think I'll get up to the slide. I made this really fancy slide about natural, but I might even save that for next for Friday's lesson instead. But that's all right. I'm not in a massive hurry to get through this stuff. I want to take my time with it. So let's talk about now immigration. Immigration is leaving an environment. So an immigration, entering an environment, are other ways that genes can enter or leave a gene pool. So immigration and immigration, most of you guys probably heard immigration, entering an environment, because if you have immigration, got to do with coming into a thing, into a country. These birds, of course, are immigrating. So they're leaving. So if these birds flew south and then they found some different birds and then they had offspring there, then they're bringing new genes to that gene pool. They're adding to that gene pool. Now the classic, and this is this is finally where I'm going to address the human being approach to this. Normally I avoid talking about human beings, but before the 20th century, ultimately human beings were stuck in the countries that they were. And so therefore, in a particular country, you would get a build-up of a sort of a gene pool of the same type of genes. If you were born in a and by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I'm trying to be just general here. I'm not trying to be racist, so please don't take anything that I say as me being racist. But if you were born in like one of the European countries, then you're probably more likely to have white, fair-colored skin. If you were born in a more Asian country, then you may have more.
Don't do it. Just don't do it. Don't say it.
Colored skin.
Oh.
And maybe perhaps because of the genes around you, you may have, you know, different stature. You may have a different shaped eyes. If you were born in a African type country, then you may have a different colored skin to the other ones. You may have an even darker colored skin, and you may have another very different stature. And those gene pools existed. Those gene pools existed around the world. And therefore, if you were someone in an African nation, then you would probably have a child with the same type of genes. They would also probably have a dark colored skin. But what then happened is that as time goes on, we started to become more, as we started to emigrate more. We started to move around the globe more. So we start to have different people entering different environments. And so therefore, if a person from a European, if a person from a European country and then a person from an African country have a child together, then their gene pools are going to mix a little bit, and then therefore their child will have very different genes from both gene pools. And so therefore, because of more connections around the world, we actually have our gene pool is actually becoming a little bit more diverse. So therefore, what does an average Chinese person maybe a little bit different now that people are moving around the world a lot more. What does an average American look like is going to change a lot because people are moving around the world. Oh man, that was dicey. I should not have tried to tackle race. That is, oh jeez, I probably insulted like 10 people already. Cancelled. You can't cancel me. I'm tired. Jesus. All right, okay. Anyway, not saying that any of those mutations are good or bad, depending on the race that you are. That's what I'm avoiding saying, because if I said that, then I would be racist. I'm just saying people are different. We all know people are different, and when different people come together, then they have children that are also different. Different isn't bad. It just means that they are unique. Okay, stop that before someone reports me to the police or something. But yeah, immigration, leaving an environment. So this is a different way that you can get different genes into a gene pool, is by moving around the world. So let's talk about, and so this is my last picture about the gene pool. It's actually a big, bright kind of picture, but I kind of like it. It's like, in my opinion, I was trying to think of a good analogy for a gene pool, and I thought to myself, you know what a good analogy for a gene pool, in my opinion, is? It's like fruit salad. All right, this fruit salad here has got strawberries, it's got some grapes, it's got some oranges, it's got some kiwi fruit. Great, beautiful. And you know what? If there's a new child born into a particular gene pool, it's like taking a spoonful of fruit salad. You may get, that gene pool has some people in it that are strawberries, some people in it are kiwi fruit. So you're going to get something similar to that, something similar to what's in the fruit salad. Now, if you had a fruit salad that was made up of just strawberries, then that's going to be a pretty boring gene pool. That's going to mean that your child is going to be just strawberries. If you take another gene pool that's filled with just grapes and you mix them together, because one species gets introduced to another species, maybe via migration, then yeah, sure, you're going to start to mix the gene pool up. You could get a spoonful of grapes, spoonful of strawberries plus grapes. Whenever you add to that gene pool, the gene pool gets richer. And the richer the gene pool means, the more different the species that can be produced from it. Grab a look at this fruit salad here. Notice that there's no banana in there. If you added some banana to that fruit salad, it would probably destroy it because banana ruins it. But there's also no apple. Apple's actually quite good in fruit salad. There's no apple in this fruit salad. You could add an apple to that fruit salad. You could find like a bowl of apple and mix that gene pool up to get a bit of a fruit salad. So then when you take a spoonful, maybe you get a grape, maybe you get a piece of apple, maybe you get a raspberry, who knows? But that's what I think about when I think about gene pools. Like, how many genes are available? Are there lots of different types of genes available? Are there only a few types of genes available? How can the gene pool be affected? How can you add more genes to something? Well, if you bring in new species, then they're going to get more genes. If you also have more mutations, there's going to be more genes in there. So yeah, that's how I sort of think about a gene pool, is like a fruit salad. It's a good analogy. I may come back to this analogy as time goes on. Let's move away from this fruit salad before we get hungry. And we'll talk about reduction in biodiversity. So this is the opposite. What time have we got here? We've got about 15 minutes. I may get to the part that I wanted to talk about anyway. Humans have introduced techniques that allow us to replicate the perfect organism, but this can reduce biodiversity. Grab a look at this picture here. We've got a massive amount of bananas here. And each of these bananas is exactly the same. Let's compare these two slides. I know that, I know that you're writing this down, but I'm going to compare these two slides. Here is a diverse gene pool. Lots of different types of fruit. You could take a spoonful of this and get, you could take 5 spoonfuls and get 5 different combinations of genes, 5 different combinations of fruit. But in this gene pool, it's all the same banana. And so if you take a banana, you are going to get the same genes. Doesn't matter what banana you take. So in comparison, this guy, not very biodiverse. So humans have found interesting ways. And there are advantages and disadvantages to that. If you, I guess the way that I think about it is like this. If you could randomly make 100 random bananas, right? You can make 100 random bananas and put them all on a table. Probably majority of them would taste disgusting. They'd be too sweet, they'd be too small, they'd be too bitter, have too big seeds, their skin would be too thick. There probably wouldn't be many really, really good bananas that you would really enjoy eating. So therefore, humans, like when we get a banana that we're like, oh, this is delicious, or we get like an apple that we think this is delicious, or if we start to find these cows, like, wow, these cows are huge, they make so much milk, we're going to want to keep those types of animals, those types of vegetables around. We're going to want to have them again. It's like, sometimes when you have a really good meal, you want to keep eating that meal over and over again. So it makes sense that you would try to replicate that organism, to replicate the perfect organism. And humans have done a really good job of doing that. And it's really cool, good, because it means that when you go to that store and you buy a banana, you probably know what that banana is going to taste like before you even eat it. But it does reduce biodiversity. And that can be a bad thing. Let's talk about it. So I'm going to change the slide. Okay, cool. Ladies and gents, all right, here we go. I'm a little bit excited about this. I made these slides last night, and I spent a long time on them. This is whenever you see a slide every so often that I'll put a lot of effort in. Yeah, this is one of those ones. Okay, let's say that we've got this. We find this weird vegetable. We're going to represent this vegetable as a blue triangle. Yeah. And of course, we take this blue triangle and we show some people, and they're like, yeah, blue is an ugly color. I don't really want to eat a blue vegetable. And so you're like, but it, maybe it tastes okay, but it doesn't taste that great. So what you do, let's just say you take this blue vegetable and you plant it in the ground. And so when you plant in the ground, you plant these seeds in the ground, you get these extra plants come out. So you've got some of the plants are a bit, some of the plants are more blue. Some of these plants are actually now purple. Like, okay, geez, okay, well, we've got lots of colors. Purple's a bit of a better color than blue, but it's not really that much better. But then you start to see these ones, and these are bigger. Now, these are all mutations. They're all mutations of the same type of plant. It's just, there's some of these are bigger, some of these are bluer, some of these are purple, but these are all mutations. They're not big mutations. They're not like one's green, and it's not like one's like massive, or one's now become a square, but they're roughly within the same sort of ballpark. So let's just say now, well, let's take this one and let's plant this one. You might say, well, why do we plant this one? Well, it's a bit bigger. And of course, if we're going to, if we're farmers, we're going to want to plant bigger vegetables. So we plant this one and we actually get these. All right. again, we've got this idea of genetic mutation. All of these are mutated genes. They're all a little bit different, you know. Some of them are more blue, some of them are smaller, some of them are bigger. They're all some random mutations, okay? But you know, because we're in charge of our own, we're the farmer, we can choose any of these mutations that we like. We can actually say, we can choose one. We can actually turn around and say, see this massive carrot, or see this massive vegetable. I'm going to take this massive vegetable and I'm going to plant this one again because I want my vegetables to be really, really big because I want to be able to, you know, get a good meal out of it. And again, you can see that we're not, and again, before I go too far, this red circle doesn't extend too far. It actually doesn't even get down here. That blue triangle that we had at the start, well, that's not a variation that we see in this one. So now we plant this purple one, and now we get these. Grab a look at these. We've got some really big color changes now. We've got color changes from all the way from blue up to like this purpley color, this maroon color almost. And then, yeah, so we could actually choose any of these plants that we plant. And you might be happy with these, but maybe you take these vegetables down to the market and a couple of people say, ew, I'm not eating these purple plants. Like, well, crap, what am I going to do now? So maybe now you decide, well, I'm going to plant this red one and see what happens. You plant the red one and you get these. And it's like, oh, well, okay, that's pretty good. People like orange, so maybe I should plant this orange one. So you plant that orange one, and then you get these. And these are another generation. We're up to generation 6, ladies and gents. We've started from a very, very, very small blue plant in generation 1, and we've already gone up to a pretty large orange plant. And so let's just say that maybe we're going to take, I don't know, maybe we'll take one more. We'll take this one here. This is orange. People love orange. Oranges are really good. And so then at the very end, after generation 7, we get this particular vegetable. And this particular vegetable sells really well. And that everyone wants to eat this big orange vegetable. No one wanted to eat that small blue vegetable. And it took 7 generations to get there. But we've now created this big orange vegetable. And the shock surprise of this is that this big orange vegetable is supposed to be the humble carrot. And this is how you can take an ugly random vegetable and turn it into a carrot by slowly genetically modifying it. How did we modify this? We modified this by artificial selection. What does that mean? Artificial selection means we chose it. I see the effort. Yeah, this went through a very, very, very long amount of effort to get to. In fact, that's what I'm going to show you guys. If you guys look, because you guys are probably like, okay, that's a bigger picture. Grab a look at this. So on the right is what we would refer to as probably more modern types of carrots. But on the left is what carrots used to look like. They used to look like these green purpley things. And you can actually still buy purple carrots. And when you buy a purple carrot, that's you're buying an ancient carrot. That's what carrots used to be like. And we've modified them by artificial selection. What is artificial selection? There's no pencil here, but I would love you to copy this down if that's all right. Sorry. Humans have been selective breeding animals and plants for hundreds of years. This is a way to make bigger vegetables or cows that make more milk, or to make horses that can run faster, or horses that can carry more food, or make pigs that can get fatter. Whatever you want, we will artificially select them. How do you pick them? Well, what we'll do is we'll say, well, this, out of all of the fruit, out of all the vegetables that got made, this one was the best. It tasted the most delicious. So let's take the seeds out of this particular plant, or let's take this particular animal and breed it so that we can get more of that type of organism. This is done by breeding the best organism. And that's why I showed you that really long sort of thing about how you can pick out of all of those organisms, out of all of those carrots, which one was the one that we liked the most. Let's take that tasty carrot. Let's take that orange carrot. Let's take that big carrot. We're going to replant that into the ground. And that's how we get to, that's how you can modify things by artificial selection. Artificial, by the way, means human selection. That was a slide that I really wanted to get up to. And so, yeah, artificial selection. I've got a couple more things, but I'm probably not going to get up to them. We're going to talk about one last slide, just because it's a pretty cool, interesting kind of slide to go on there. But yeah, I can give you guys another 30 seconds to copy this down if you haven't already. All right. That's 30 seconds. Last slide. Maybe I've got time for one more slide because I would like to. How much have I got? Yeah, I've got 2 slides left, but I've got a bit too much to write down. But I will show you guys this last slide here. I wanted to show you guys this slide because, again, it gives you that idea. It's like these are on the left 5 common foods before and after humans domesticated them. Now, domestication is another way to describe, there's another word that describes before humans, you know, artificially, when something's domesticated, it means humans have artificially, what's the word, selected them. So let's go have a look at the one on the top one is the wild watermelon. I look at that, like, the hell. But if you compare that to the modern watermelon, they are similar. So judging by paintings by fruit dating to the 17th century, watermelons may have once seeds arranged in a swirly geometric pattern, which is kind of cool. Over time, humans have bred watermelons to have bright red juicy interiors. The seeds are often removed to prevent the planting from being fertilized by pollination. Yeah, because you don't want those seeds to then start to pollinate, because that'd be bad. But yeah, like, look how different these two things are. So humans have gone from the one on the left to the one on the right. And how they've done that is by slowly, over many hundreds of years, picking the best looking watermelon with the most red inside there and breeding that one, and then picking the next one with the most red interior. While bananas had large seeds throughout the fruit's interior, whereas now there's barely any seeds in a banana. And so you can see the massive changes here. Eggplants once came in a wide shape, array of shapes, but now they're all pretty much look the same. Selective breeding, and this is the word that I used before, has made the spine disappear and left us with an oblong purple vegetable with their familiar black color. And you go look, so there's had a spine where the modern plant connects the stem. That's pretty cool. Wild carrots, yeah, you see, right? You got this purple bluey color, which was like, you know, not ideal, had a strong flavor, and it had lots and lots of roots. It also wasn't really that tasty. But over time, we then moved to this orange carrot. And we've done that just by, you know, selecting the biggest of the carrots, the carrot with the least amount of roots, and planting that, and then so slowly selecting which carrots we want to do. The last one's corn. Corn's the most wild one. Look at that. corn was originally like, you know, these grass seed kind of things, and now we've evolved it to look like a modern corn. And you guys might have heard me just say, whoa, whoa, did you just say we evolved it? And you might say, is that the right word? And this is probably, you know what, this is where we're going to end. Yes, technically all of these are evolutions. This is still evolution, and evolution is a change in a species, a change in the heritable traits, a change in the traits of a species over time. So over generations, we've evolved these watermelons to change from, you know, having not much red fruit to having lots of red fruit. So we can force things to evolve. If you even think about domestication of other things like dogs or cows, yes, cows and dogs have evolved because humans have intervened. This is still an evolution. It might not be a natural one, it's an artificial evolution, but it is still a change in a species. So yes, human beings can force a species to evolve. We could even force other humans to evolve, but that's how you get to most, you know, scary sci-fi kind of things and stuff like that. But yeah, that's probably where I'm going to finish today's lesson. Ladies and gents, I'm going to stop.